Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh man, do we have a great show for you. Love talking about culture. I mean, let's be honest with you. It's one of my favorite topics on the show is when I get a great author who writes a great book on culture. It's one of my favorite topics because it's so vast. And there are so many things that we can talk about. And as I talked with Dr. Hamill, Dr. Laura Hamill, who's going to be on the show, by the way, brilliant, awesome, the book, The Power of Culture. It's fantastic. Bringing values to life at work. Folks, you know, I've said this ad nauseum. Whether you think you do or you don't, you have a culture, okay? Intentional or not, you've created some sort of culture, all right? What you don't correct, you accept. That's part of your culture, okay? We're going to talk about aspire culture, but many of you live in what we call an aspire culture. This is what we want to be. We're not really that, but this is what we want to be, okay? And so you put a bunch of words up on the wall and we go, rah, rah, this is our values, this is our culture, this is who we are. Not really, but it's what we say we are, right? So we're going to have to we're going to have to walk through the weeds on this one with her to get through all that. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be brilliant. Please ask your questions. We're live wherever you're watching us. So please ask questions. Dr. Laura Hamill is happy to answer them, even if they're difficult. She's okay with difficult questions. She's absolutely fine with that, which is great because I don't have to deal with the difficult questions. I'll let her deal with that. I just get to ask them, which is more fun for me. Before we get to her, though, let's we do every week, right? We're four-part people. We're physical, mental, emotional, spiritual people. The fact of the matter is we have to be growing in each one of those areas to be a complete person. And you know what? We never stay static. So if we're not growing, we're dying. And so we need to continue to move in those things. So what I have you do every week, evaluate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 5 being average, 1 being, 10 being it just doesn't get any better. So physically, rate yourself on eating right, getting enough exercise, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water. Maybe going to the doctor, doing checkups. How would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? Now, look, here's the deal. Let's say you're a low number, 2, 3. Don't beat yourself up here. That's not the point of this exercise. The point of this exercise is for you to take a look at that 2 and 3 and go, okay, that's a starting point. Where can I improve? And I don't want you to try to go from a 2 to a 10 or a 3 to 10. Let's just try to get to 2.5, right? There's probably something in the pantry you shouldn't be in there that can get us moving in that right direction, right? There's probably a street in your neighborhood that you could be walking that you're not walking, okay? I mean, there's probably an hour before midnight that you could actually get to bed, okay? There is a sink with a glass that you could fill it with water and drink more of it, okay? So there's just little things that we can do. We're not asking you to do all of them all at once. Okay, so that's your first number. Second number is your mental intellectual number. Folks, I can sit on this book all day. Sit on it. I can absolutely put it underneath my tail end here on a chair. I will not absorb a darn thing through the book. Okay, I have to be an active participant in the learning. I have to be an active participant in the growth of wisdom and knowledge and understanding. I have to actually read it, look at it, and then I have to take action on it. Okay. And listen, I tell my coaching clients this: I don't mind you reading books. I encourage you reading books. I've read 2 of my books are in audio. So I'm all for audible books. But if you're going to listen to a book, when you step out of your car, find one thing that you listen to, write it down and take action on it. Okay. Right. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how's that number for you? So third number, emotional. I'm a big, huge Daniel Goleman fan. He's written so much on emotional intelligence and emotional quotients. Here's how we break it down here. How well are you able to control your emotions under stress and pressure? First. And you say, oh, I'm pretty good at it. Really? How about when you're driving to work in the morning and somebody just cuts you off? How's your emotional control then? You're in the grocery store and you're trying to get home to make dinner. And that person all of a sudden goes, I forgot my checkbook in the car. Can you hold on while I come back? How's your level going there, right? Maybe your mom or dad with small children, little ones. And all of a sudden, right there in the middle of the grocery store, they just sit down and scream and have a tantrum. How well are you able to control your emotions there? Right? I know you're giggling, and that's okay. You should, because we all face these things. But those are the tests that we have to overcome, right? This is emotional control. The second part of that is, how well are you able to tap into and understand the emotions of another human being? You know, part of our emotions is not just about us. It's about how well we are able to connect to others. And, you know, I don't care if it's personal or business. The fact of the matter is, do you stop long enough and do you have the emotional vocabulary to truly understand the emotions of another human being and how they're trying to communicate to you beyond the words? Oftentimes in psychology, we like to call this, you know, part of psychological safety. I like to take it to a whole nother level. It goes beyond that. It's part called being human. That's real humanity, when we stop long enough and quiet our souls and our spirits and our mind long enough to listen and be able to tap into the emotions of another human being. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say you're doing there? And then finally, the spiritual end. I know it's not popular. I don't really care. But we all live by faith. You woke up this morning, you sipped your coffee believing it wasn't poisonous. You pushed the button in your car believing it was going to start. You walked across a crosswalk. It said walk, and you believe the cars weren't going to hit you. You made plans for your future. They haven't happened yet you believe they're going to happen. That's all faith, right? We're spiritual beings in a physical form. We connect with each other on a spiritual level. It doesn't take us long to remove the emotions and remove the mental aspects of who we are, and we recognize we still connect with people on a level that we don't quite fully understand, and that science probably isn't going to get right. And that's okay, right? And then what brings you back to peace in the midst of your chaos, in the midst of your craziness, or even a sense of joy? Is it God? Is it nature? Is it something else? And then if it's not working, what are you going to do to change it? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say you're doing there? Those areas are like the air in the tires of your car. If one tire's flat, it's hard to steer the car, isn't it? If all 4 tires are flat, what happens? Well, over the course of time, you're going to ruin the car. And speaking of someone who has her tires all rightly inflated and she's rolling along nicely, her name is Dr. Laura Hamill. She's an organizational psychologist, ex-Microsoft director, and Limeade co-founder. Delicious, by the way, Limeade. An employee experienced software company. Through her, I know it's not the same thing, but I have to tell you, I loved Limeade. It's just something I do. Through her firm, Paris Phoenix Group, she advises company on how to transform their culture. She's also the host, and I suggest that you listen to her at the Happy at Work podcast. And her new book is what we're going to talk about today, The Power of Culture, Bringing Values of Life at Work. Absolutely fantastic. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, and welcome to the first time, and I don't think the last time, Dr. Laura Hamill. Dr. Hamill, welcome to A New Direction.
Thanks so much for having me, Jay. I'm excited to be here with you.
I'm excited to have you here. I love the book. I made no bones about that with you when we were talking earlier, and I just really, really enjoyed this book. And as I said to you, for me, it actually almost begged more questions than for me that I started thinking about, because there's a lot of answers in this book. But man, I started asking some questions. I got some questions about this book. One of the things that we have a difficulty with, I think we have a difficulty with it, is defining culture. I think often what we like to say is, you know, it's kind of like we know it when we see it.
Yeah.
Type thing. Is it really that difficult to define it? Is it because it's so vast that it's difficult to find, or is it one of those things that is the culture is defined by the size of a company, or all of these characteristics, or in others involved with this troubles with defining culture?
Yeah. So there absolutely is a definition that's pretty well accepted to be the underlying values and norms and beliefs of the company. The problem is, it's the stuff that's deep down, right? It's the stuff that's under the surface that you have to dig into, that you have to really be looking for to be able to understand. So the term you said, you know it when you see it. The problem is, once you're part of a culture, you don't see it anymore. So it's this really interesting thing that happens with culture is that you just become part of it. Once you start in an organization, in the very beginning, you can see it. But once you're there for a while, it just becomes natural. It becomes the way you do things. And that's what's really tricky about it, especially changing it, is because once you're part of that system, it's really hard to see it anymore. You've probably heard of the analogy of does a goldfish know it's swimming in water? The water, and I always, how do we ever know what an animal really, really thinks about some of these
I'm like,
things, right?
okay, Dr. Laura, this is the first time that we've ever done the goldfish in the water thing. Okay, I'll let you know on the show. We've never done that. Go ahead. You started you started the
You gotta
analogy,
keep
so
going.
you got to finish it now.
But the idea is it just becomes like your water, right? Culture is what's around you, you're swimming in it, but you don't even really see it anymore. And so that's what's one of the reasons why culture is so hard, is because it's hard to see. And I'm with you on the questions. Like, I have been studying culture most of my career. I've been working for a long time, multiple 30, more than 30 years. And I still have questions about culture, right? I study it all the time. That's why I think it's so important. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book. It's I just feel like there's so many basics to culture that most people don't have access to, or don't spend time thinking about or understanding. And I think the more that we can understand the nature of culture, the more likely we can work on it.
Mm. Okay. So, by the way, beautiful answer. Thank you. So, here's the next piece that I want to get into. There are people who are watching and listening to the show. And by the way, I'm just going to shout out to one person, Russ Murray. I know you're there at the Lincoln Treatment Plant and you're in charge of that whole thing. Thank you for watching and listening. He's a childhood friend, best friend that I grew up with. We're more than friends or brothers, and he always watches and listens and he critiques me regularly. And I appreciate that about him, by the way. We all have cultures in our businesses, and I know he's listening today, watching today. Actual culture versus aspire culture.
Yeah.
Like I opened the show with, like it or not, you got a culture, whether you're intentional about it or not. But I feel, maybe I'm wrong, I feel like oftentimes I walk into businesses and they're an aspire culture. They put their core values and their mantras on their walls. But then when you actually interact with the culture, it has nothing to do with anything on the walls.
Completely. And that I feel like most companies, I shouldn't say most, many, I don't have the number, are in that boat, because companies know that they're supposed to have values, right? So think of values as the aspirational culture. It's the small set of cultural attributes that we're going to call out, and we're going to say, these are the things that matter the most for our future success. And so we're going to focus on these things because they're going to make a big difference. So most companies know they're supposed to have those. They're supposed to have values on their website. They're supposed to have values behind the receptionist desk. So that's great. The problem is that most companies don't understand that that's the teeny tiny first baby step of your work. By getting clear about what you're trying to actually create. Now you have to do the work of making it real. And making it real is not getting t-shirts made. Making it real is not having margarita parties or pizza parties. I'm not anti-margarita by any means, but
and we're not anti-pizza either, just to be fair.
Right. We're not anti-pizza. Completely. But that is surface level stuff, right? What really matters is what happens in meetings, behind closed doors, in Zoom meetings, in Teams meetings, how employees treat each other, how managers and leaders treat employees. The way we are with each other is what we're talking about. And that's hard work. That's not something you just put a sign up and change, a poster up and change. So that's really why, another reason why I wanted to write this book. I wanted to try to make something that felt really hard more straightforward, a way to kind of operationalize the steps that you could take to make this real. And, I think that a lot of leaders underestimate how big of a problem that is, to have a big gap between what you say you are and what you actually are. And I call this, in my book, I talk about it in the term cultural betrayal.
Yeah.
And it sounds really dramatic to say betrayal, but I actually think it represents how people can feel about that disconnect. went and you saw what this company stood for on their website, and you watched that video that the corporate, PR people put out about how cool it is to work here, and you got really excited because you felt like this is the place for me. It aligns with who I am. It aligns with my personal values. I'm going to go work there. And then you get there and you start to see, wait a second, this has nothing to do with what they said that this company is or what it's like to work here. And it can really piss people off, right? It
Mhm.
can start to create this sense of like, I am withdrawing. So withdrawal behaviors that can look, like sort of innocent in the beginning of like maybe not asking questions, but then it starts to become, oh, I'm not even going to come to the company meeting anymore. I'm not going to come, I'm not going to be, come to the big, summer company picnic. I just don't, I'm emotionally withdrawing from this because this is not the place that I thought it was. So it's a pretty big deal to not have an alignment between who you say you are and who you actually are. Now, I don't think any employee would expect it to be perfect, but you need to show that there's work being done to close that gap.
Mhm. Mhm. And I want to say this. I don't think it is overly dramatic betrayal. I don't think it is. And let me say why I believe that. You know, we go into these interviews and we work so hard to get through an interview, and then we get the job, and everybody is so nice, and they're helping us out, and they're helping us unpack the office that we're about to move into, and everybody's kind and generous with their time. Ask me for anything.
Yeah.
And then when the honeymoon is over and the marriage of your new job starts, you start to uncover that this isn't the company that you were in at all when you were onboarded. And you go, well, you lied to me.
Mhm. Right?
So it's not overly dramatic to say it's betrayal because this happens to employees daily
Yeah.
after they get onboarded, that all of a sudden they realize they got into something that is absolutely not
Yeah.
part of what they signed up for.
Right.
So it does feel like a betrayal. So I want people to understand it's not being over dramatic. If you've ever been in that situation, and I think we all have, if you've lived long enough and had a career long enough, where you've walked into a situation and you went, oh, this is not what I signed up for.
Right.
You know, and I think there's something else, and you say this in this chapter. You say simply declaring the culture through the values doesn't make it real.
Right. The fact that some leaders think that it is just a little mind
I know that's hilarious.
Or sending the email like, hey, I sent the email that said, here's what our values are.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. And then, can I tell you something that irritates me? When I go, I go through culture decks. I actually did a show on culture decks, I think like maybe the first year or two of the 7-year show, and went through culture decks of huge companies. Can I tell you something that I saw as a commonality in every one of their culture values? Integrity.
Yeah.
Okay, can I just say this and tell me if I'm being unfair? If you have to tell us that your value is integrity, we got a problem, I think.
Completely agree. Completely agree with you. There's such table stakes that are in most
Right.
values, right? And there's a company that I know that proactive was one of their values. I'm like, what? Really? Being proactive? Like, that's really a differentiating aspect of your culture, and that people aren't there yet.
Right.
It is fascinating because I just feel like people don't, leaders who are working on their culture, they don't understand what should these things be, and they really should be the things that are unique to you and differentiating for you to be success, for your company to be successful. And it should be a small set of things that you can actually stand behind for a longer period of time, that say this is what's going to really make us special, unique, and successful. And it's not just a set of things that are like, oh, let's put integrity on the list so that we can point back to it in case anybody does something really crappy. Like if somebody steals something, then I can say, hey, no, we have integrity here. To me, like there's a bunch of things that I see companies do that are, it is so clear they're trying to patch something up. right? That there's some other problem they're just trying to patch up with their values.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it shouldn't be that you could, like, your values would be the same as the bakery next door, right?
Sure.
Right. It should be very clear that it's unique to you.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this later. That it's got to be a behavioral,
Yeah.
a value that's demonstrated in behavior, and so you have to attach the behaviors to that, I think, and be more clear. And you're absolutely right, and we're going to talk about that. You're listening to Dr. Laura Hamill here on A New Direction. Her book, The Power of Culture: Bringing Values to Life at Work. We're going to be right back right after this. Hey, folks, sponsors of A New Direction, Linda Craft Team Realtors, our longtime, first time ever sponsor. Listen, they help people transition in life. I know what you're saying. They do real estate. What do you mean life? Well, think about it. Every place you've ever lived has been a life transition at some point. They've been 40 years helping people with that life transition by taking stress out of that portion of your living, whether you're buying or selling a home. So when you're ready to make your next life transition, whatever that may be, buying or selling, start with Linda Craft Team Realtors. It's lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com, and Zoundy. Oh, I love Zoundy. And you go, what is Zoundy? It is the ultimate game changer for authors, publishers, and professionals in the audiobook space. I'm telling you, it is audio book marketing customization that takes it to a whole nother level. I use them. It is absolutely powerful. I can give away 1,000 of my books by audio to my audiences when I'm speaking, and they can download it with my code. I can give it away on different social media platforms, and here's the most powerful part. I know who downloaded the book because I have their name, I have their email address, and I can now put together and interact with the reader. How cool is that? So listen, I'm going to just tell you something. Whether you're launching your first audiobook, scaling your catalog, or leveraging your audiobook to market other products or services, Zoundy simplifies the process while unlocking unlimited opportunities. Go to zoundy.com/J. That's zoundy.com/J, J-A-Y. Use my promotional code J25 and you'll unlock special savings. That's zoundy.com/J and use the code J25. You're going to be so glad you did. And we're back here on A New Direction with Dr. Laura Hamill, the book, The Power of Culture, Bringing Values to Life at Work. Absolutely fantastic book. I really enjoyed reading it. We talking about this aspirational culture thing before the break. And I want to talk about the disconnect between aspirational culture and business strategy.
Yes.
Work with me here on, because there is a big, huge disconnect, and it's at a C-suite level oftentimes. I think I may be wrong, but I do think that that's part of it. But then I think it's because the culture is not pervasive enough throughout the entire organization. Help us understand this disconnection.
Yeah. So there's lots of different reasons why it gets disconnected. Sometimes it's as basic as the strategy isn't clear, right? Like, we don't even know what we're doing strategically. We don't know what our goals are, or the leaders don't understand that. I've had that happen before, where I'll do a big project around culture, and the leaders will say, "Oh, thank goodness you're here, because I didn't know what our strategy was." So there's that part
Right.
of this disconnect. But most of the time, it's the fact that leaders don't understand how important it is that these go hand in hand, that they're intertwined. They think about culture as sort of this separate thing that maybe HR should drive. That's kind of like, oh, that's nice, and I'll get fewer people complaining about things if we just say we have a good culture. And there's a disconnect between understanding that we need everybody to understand what these small set of behavioral expectations are centered around our values, what those things are, and that we need everybody to be doing those things so that we can be successful. It's really attaching the behaviors that people have every day to the strategic objectives, right? And saying, gosh, if we want to be a company that has all of these innovation goals, well, boy, oh boy, we better make sure that people feel like they can speak up, that they can take risks, that it's okay to fail, those are the kinds of things that I see as not connected in most organizations. Leaders often don't see, oh, wait, if I want to achieve that thing, I have all these people who work here. I got to make sure that the conditions are right for them to be able to help us get there, right?
Mm,
And that we're all rowing in the same direction. What I see a lot of times happening is what really goes down, from a behavioral perspective, there's some things that actually work against you being able to be successful. So if you take that innovation example, if you look deep in the organization, you might find that managers are actually encouraging people to be compliant and encouraging people to not take risks. And most organizations aren't really clear enough about their own culture. They don't understand it to see, oh my gosh, that's happening.
mm.
And we need to change that. And we need to make sure that people could take risks and that they can put themselves out there. And this has been in my experience on working on culture. And I've done lots of different kinds of studies and work on culture. I just see these really blatant disconnects, between what the company's trying to achieve and what's really happening culturally. And so that's the idea of, are we all rowing in the same direction? Because it's hard enough to reach those goals, right? Even if people are rowing in the same direction, it's hard enough. But if some people are, pulling the paddle in a different direction, it's just not going to happen that those goals are going to be reached.
I don't remember who said it. Maybe you can remember the person who said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't remember who the
Drucker. I think it's Drucker.
was. It
Yeah.
Drucker?
Or lunch, or it depends on meals, multiple meals.
Yeah, right. Here's the pushback that I sometimes get from CEOs, right, on that specifically.
Yeah.
And that is that tying culture to profitability becomes a challenge for us. And I know that you talk in this book about measuring culture.
Yeah.
And I think that's a conundrum in of itself, trying to measure it, because listen, I come from studying under B.F. Skinner's last students. So I'm all about measurement, okay? And operationally defining everything, okay? That because we can operationally define anything in a way that we can measure it. Culture seems very difficult to measure in terms of, how do we measure it in terms of profitability and those types of things within the business and the business strategy and outcomes. And I think from a psychological, sociological perspective, we can qualitatively say, well, listen, if you're in a bad culture, that's not good. I think we can all agree to that, right?
Right.
But how do we get that to a quantitative measurement that you think the CEOs would be satisfied with?
Yeah. And I think this is part of the problem. The thing that's hard about this is that each company has to uniquely understand their culture. And I think that's kind of the underlying problem, is that most companies don't want to do the work, right? They don't want to spend the time to really dig in and understand their culture, connect it to their strategy, and really commit to that for the long term. Yeah. So because of that, they want to somebody tell me the easy answer. Let's go get that culture cookie cutter from Netflix and put it on us. And it's not going to work. So that connection with profitability isn't going to work if you're trying to do what everybody else is doing. I just had a CEO text me the other day. We want to be a high performance culture. Tell me how to do that. Over text? Okay, I'll give you a quick text and we'll be done with that, right? Like, come on. And so my first response, right, is, well, I know right away when somebody says high performance, that means you're not meeting your company goals.
Right.
And you want to take it out on employees and say, we need to hold people accountable because this isn't working, right? So this is what's really hard about this, is that if you actually do the work and get clear about the culture you're trying to create and how it connects to your strategic goals, your long-term strategic objectives, then you can measure it, because then you're saying, hey, we know that we need to have more innovation behaviors. I'm just using that example, right? More risk-taking. We need to have people to come up with new ideas. We need people to feel safe to come up with new ideas. So we need managers and leaders helping to create those environments. you can start to measure that stuff, right? You can put that in an employee survey, no problem. Start to think about, around here, is it okay to speak up and say something that everybody else might not agree with?
Hmm.
You can start to measure those things in your employee survey. It's a different kind of employee survey question, right? It's different than saying, I have clear goals, but you can start to break that down and understand that. You can also talk about your values and say, leaders consistently demonstrate this particular value or our values overall. Managers consistently demonstrate them. Employees, I almost always see when you do those 3 different levels that there's one of those groups that is not consistently demonstrating the values. Usually there's some people that are, but it's fascinating when it's leaders that aren't consistently demonstrating the values, because it's really hard to actually get a lot of momentum with the culture work if the leaders aren't the ones that are at the forefront of demonstrating the values. But then you can see the difference between what if leaders are and employees are, but managers aren't. So there's work you can do to kind of close those gaps if you have really done some work around what is the culture you're trying to create and how is it connected to our success as a company.
You in what you just said, 2 questions popped into my head that I did not have written down, which is why I love doing the show, because these are the questions that are just in.
Yeah.
And that is, you bring up really this issue of we have cultural unawareness within our organizations, in that we make the assumption we know the culture, but the reality is we really aren't very aware at all.
No.
And I'm referring back to research that Dr. Tasha Urich did on self-awareness, where 95% of the people believe they're very self-aware, but then in her research she found out that on a good day you're only about 15% aware. Okay, and so if we apply that across the organization and you multiply that out, we're not very self-aware at all, much less being self-aware about our culture.
Right. Completely. Partly related to the goldfish water problem, right? Because
Right.
it's just hard to see it. I would also throw in the complexity of the way that leaders experience the culture is different from the way frontline
Sure.
employees would experience the culture, right? Power has a huge kind of impact on how people treat you. I remember when I got promoted, when I was working at Microsoft, I got promoted into kind of a higher title. And all of a sudden, I was like, the day it happened, people were treating me differently, right? Being
Right.
much more kind to me, being much more helpful to me
Right.
than they were the day before I got that title.
Yeah.
And that's super obvious to most of us, I think. But when you think about that at scale and how that impacts
Right.
people in positions of power and their understanding of the culture, it tends to be that people in power they have a little bit more of a rosy picture of it. When I left Microsoft, I was able to do this really cool project back with Microsoft. And I worked on acquisitions. So I worked on 38 of Microsoft's acquisitions. And it was fascinating to study across the acquisitions and see what we could learn. And one of the things that we learned was that the leaders of those acquired companies definitely had they had a similar kind of understanding of the culture, like cultural attributes, but it was more positive than the way frontline employees experience the culture. So it's a really important piece that you're bringing up about that awareness and your own context, and kind of just power by itself impacts that.
Well, I think what happens is the higher level you go up in an organization, you're more insulated from the actual culture.
Yeah.
So it's like it creates barriers because you don't see it, because the further you go up, the less that you're interacting with the employee, which means that you're being insulated from it. So you make assumptions from as you move up that power ladder that the
Yeah.
culture is just fine.
Yes.
And so then go ahead.
And it must be because it just reinforced me. It basically just promoted me. So it must be a great culture, right? It's like it's a self-reinforcing thing.
Right.
And that's another, problem with it too.
Right.
It's
Because
not so bad.
no, right, because you go, well, I'm promoted. Right. And listen, there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, I think we're making it sound like, oh, well, we're so selfish. Well, yeah, we are. Okay, I mean we are, but but because we're trying to take care of ourselves and our families, right? And
Yeah,
so what becomes important is, okay, I'm moving up. I'm able to give my family a better life. Well, that's not being selfish. That's just what any of us would do.
yeah.
But what happens in the process is we get further and further away from the actual culture. And
Right.
so, out of sight, out of mind.
That's right. That's completely right. And so that just kind of reinforces if we need power to help us change culture, people in positions of
Right.
power, and they're far removed from it, and they've been reinforced for being part of this culture by being promoted up through the ranks,
Mhm.
and they're still a goldfish in water, you can start to see all the reasons why culture change is hard. And so it makes it really the companies that do a good job with culture are more the exception.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think this is where, every year, this is the time of year because we're at the beginning of 2025, where we have our organizations and businesses are setting their goals, right? And I think what came out of this reading your book was that why don't we set goals for are we in check with our culture?
Yes. Yes.
Why don't we
I'm
why don't
with
we
you.
why don't we do a quarterly check-in where we go back to the employees and go, are we on okay, but it doesn't have to be quarterly. Let's go once a year. Beginning the middle of the year and the end of the year. Is our culture on track
Right.
for what we say we are? Are we really doing that? And
Yeah.
and and that has to be a conversation with the employees. It can't be in the boardroom.
Yeah. A real simple set of questions is just two questions. How is our culture helping us?
Mm,
And how is our culture holding us back?
mm,
And I think that helping us is important because in most cases, it's not yes or no, right? There are some aspects of the culture that are like, this is great. I love this part of what we do and how we are with each other. So let's not get rid of that.
mm.
And let's be clear about that and get excited about that and double down on that.
Mm.
But then which aspects of the culture are holding us back? I think the holding us back kind of idea or hindering us idea, you can start to see, well, gosh, that's why we need to work on it because we could be so much better. We could be so much more aligned if we worked on that, if we figured that piece out. So those are two questions I'd like to ask.
Yeah, I think those are great questions to ask. I know that we're going to have a break here in a couple minutes, and so there's a part of me that's thinking about taking an early break because I want to go into how do we change culture.
Yeah.
And I know you've written a lot about that, and I think it's an important part of it. So I'm going to do a break right now with you, and then we'll come back and we're going to talk about how we become more intentional about taking an Aspire culture and actually closing that gap to making it our culture. You're listening to Dr. Laura Hamill on A New Direction. The book is entitled The Power of Culture, Bringing Values to Life at Work. Fabulous. Get it at bookstores everywhere, Amazon too. And I'm sure if you go to her website, which is what, Dr. Hamill?
It is Paris, the city, Phoenix, the city, group.com, parisphoenixgroup.com.
And I'm sure they can purchase that book through there too. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's links there. Yeah.
There's links there as well. So you could do that. parisphoenixgroup.net.
Com.
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 Com. Thank you. You're listening to her here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, Linda Craft Team Realtors, let me just tell you this. I think if you go to lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com, I think it's the most comprehensive real estate website I've ever seen. Excuse me. Uh, you know, everybody has listings, what's for sale. Okay, everybody does that. So do they. But you know what I find that a lot of places don't have? How about that they have an article written by a child psychologist, How to Move with Children? How about a veterinarian who writes How to Move with Pets? Right? How about those type of things? That's what I'm talking about. They like to say they're on the bleeding edge of technology, but they also say they're on the bleeding edge of real estate. And so I would encourage you, check out lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. You're going to be so glad that you did. And if you're looking for a place to hang your license, why not check them out? I'm telling you, you're going to love their culture. I promise you will. And then my newest sponsor here on A New Direction, Zoundy. I'm just telling you, it's for authors, publishers, professionals in the audiobook world. If you're looking to market your book in a special way, if you're looking to generate reviews, network with influencers, engage with audiences. I'm just telling you, this new audio platform is for you as an author, a publisher, any professional in the audiobook space. Check out zoundy.com/J. Zoundy.com/J. That's your special little get in. And then use my code J25 to get discounts. That's zoundy.com/J, and then use J25 to get your special savings. I'm telling you, it is really cool. I use it. It is fantastic. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend, Dr. Laura Hamill. Are you enjoying the show at all, Dr. Laura?
Very much. I love this conversation. It's so much fun talking with you. I really appreciate going deeper, and digging into some of these topics.
Yeah, this is fun, isn't it? It's kind of fun. We
Yes.
get a little deeper on this. All right, so we want to fill in this gap between our current culture and our aspire to culture.
Yeah.
Help us. I know that there's a lot of pieces, okay? Because I mean, I've studied the intentional cultural circle.
Yes.
In fact, I'm looking at it right now. Okay. And I'm looking at these 8 bubbles. Okay.
Yeah.
And starting with cultural vision. So can we move through this in about 13 minutes?
Absolutely.
Reasonably, do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to I created this a long time ago, actually working with clients, because they would say to me, gosh, just help me figure out how to do this. Like, what's the step-by-step? It feels so hard. I'm like, it's true. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to figure out, but you absolutely, if you take it step by step, it feels a lot more doable. It's a circle, meaning you're kind of never done. And that's one of the things I think that's also hard for people to understand. It's like, you have to commit for the long term to culture work. And so the circle basically starts with the idea of creating a vision. It's a lot of what we've been talking about around getting really clear about what are those small set of values that we need to focus on in order for the business to be successful. You need to talk about it. You need to kind of paint a picture of it. You need to talk about why. So there's some work to do around the vision. But once you do that, behavioralizing is really important, because I see a lot of companies keep the culture, the new values at just like a one little phrase, and people don't understand what that really looks like in action. So show me from a behavioral perspective, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you want me specifically to do for each of the values? I also highly recommend that we think about how managers create the conditions for this, and leaders too. So getting some small sets of behavior so people can see themselves is a big piece of this. There's also an educational component where we want. Yeah, go ahead. See, there's a lot to talk about in each one.
Yeah, because you got to back the truck up here. You got to behavior, and I got to back it up. I heard the beep, beep, beep in my head as it was going in reverse, and I couldn't stop it. And I was like, okay, I got to stop her here, because the behavioral piece I think is absolutely critical, because we can't just jump into values without behavior. But then I think to myself, what are in the culture? Are the behaviors are they all the same? Or do we establish different sets of behaviors depending on your position within the company that fit into the culture?
I'd say generally the same, because
Okay.
we want to have a way that we can work across teams, across groups that's shared, right? That we want to know that if you're in accounting and I'm in HR, that we have this shared understanding of how we are together, even though we're not in the same department. So they should be the same.
Okay.
Where I differ a bit is based on power, based on levels of power, levels of the organization. So more of the kind of vertical differences versus the horizontal ones versus the vertical ones.
Yeah.
So because I think that managers have to create those conditions. And so there's some additional things they need to do. They need to make sure that the team is understanding these expectations, right? And that they're reinforcing them.
Right.
And then the same for leaders.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to education.
The education piece is really about how are we going to make sure people understand not only what these expectations are, but why. The why is so important. This is not just you come and you comply. We want to inspire people to feel like they're part of something that's bigger and that they like feel a connection to. So
Right.
there's actual intention we have to have around when new people come on. How do we teach people about our culture on a regular basis? How do we remind people of this? So education's a big part of it. The next part is around accountability, and that gets to some of the measurement pieces you were talking about before. Like, how do we stay on top of this? How do we measure it? And I also really encourage us to think about leaders having some accountability, some stake in the game around their role with culture. So I want leaders to be the mouthpieces of culture. I want them to feel like they have some responsibility around that. So that can look a lot of different ways depending on your organization, but maybe there are some KPIs for them associated with culture for their divisions.
Mhm.
Then I also like to have just champions, the idea that I love people throughout the organization at all different levels to feel like they are the advocates for the culture, that they talk about the culture. So there can be work that can be done around more at the front line level, how we get people involved with the culture. So that's a big part of it.
Okay, so I'm going to stop here because I think there is. We went through these first four, ending in accountability. I think it's important for people to understand that these next four are part of bringing the culture to life.
That's right. We kind of set the stage, right, with the first four.
Yeah. So the first four is kind of like, okay,
Now we're ready.
we're setting the stage for this more intentional culture.
That's right.
Now we're the second half of the second four are now we're going to actually take everything that we've done through the first four. We're going to bring this to life within the culture.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And
I
so
just want to make sure that we are clear on that so that the listener
that's
wasn't
good.
confused.
Thank you, Jay, for calling that out.
Being the cultural champions is the first part of bringing culture
it to life.
and by the way, these people are really, really important.
Absolutely.
They're so important. You've got to have these people who are champions for the culture. If you do not have people who are champions for the culture, let's be honest here, it's really difficult to make this culture work.
That's right. And completely. And it has to be something that is authentic, right? It's not just, I got assigned to be the culture champion. Yay. It's people who are like, people who are like, I want to do this, like this is exciting to me. I want this to be kind of part of my job. I want to talk to people about this. So there's a lot of different ways that can play out, but it's really important that it's people not just in positions of power who talk about the culture.
Yes, it has to be boots on the ground, people who are doing the work, who truly believe in the culture that we're trying to implement in the business, and they believe in it. And it can't be scripted. So you can't a CEO can't go, I really like Jay and Laura. I think they would be great. I know they don't really believe in the culture, but they're such good talkers, and they can convince a lot of people. We should just have them be the cultural champions. Well, if Jay and Laura don't believe in the culture,
right? Bad news.
Yeah, it's great at talkers as you and I are.
Completely. It'll backfire. Right? It'll backfire.
Yeah, right.
Completely bad idea.
Yeah,
it has to be people who are like, oh, I love this. And, it's like the opposite of the cultural betrayal piece we were talking about before, right?
Right.
It's like people are like, oh, this is me. I'm excited about this. And if you can find those people and get those people and reinforce them, right, to be part of this, it goes so far, because if an employee sees, oh, this is somebody I sit next to, and they really feel something here. Let me listen to this in a different way. It can be really powerful.
Yeah.
The next piece is around communication, and the communication piece, it has to be just the drumbeat. It has to be something. It can't be, oh, we talked about this at that one company meeting last year. There has to be a unique way for your organization that we talk about it all the time. And it can be informal, but it also can be formal. And usually a combination of both of those things, where somebody kind of brings it up in a meeting, but also that we have this recurring process for talking about it. Mm-hmm. The next piece is, the next two really could be their own circles in and of themselves. One of them is experiences, meaning people, maybe when we get together as a whole company, that we have experiences related to the culture. So it could be that we get together and go kind of deep on one of our values and learn about it a little bit more. going back to that innovation topic that I keep harping on. Maybe we have a speaker on innovation and we talk about how it's connected to our day-to-day ways we treat each other.
Mm.
There's experiences that are really important because those kind of stand out for people, stand out for employees. Like, oh, I remember when we did that thing. The thing that's important to this is a lot of companies, all those steps I just talked about already, all the way around the circle, they skip all those steps and they just have the experiences, right?
Mm.
So let's have that party or let's have that outside
Right.
speaker, but we didn't do all the work to connect it to anything.
Right.
And so that's why experiences are important, but all the work needs to come beforehand. And then the last one, I know we don't have a ton of time, but the last one is really about systems and practices. So if there's nothing worse than saying, here's our culture, here's all the behaviors, we're teaching everybody about this, but the way we do billing, the way we treat our customers, the way we do planning, the way we onboard people has nothing to do with all of this really hard work we just did. So your systems and practices really need to align and reflect all that important work around the culture. It's easy to see that from a people, like the people system, not easy, but you can see, oh, I can see how when we hire people, we should hire them with these values in mind. And when we onboard people, we should talk about these new values in the culture we're trying to create. It's kind of obvious to see those, but sometimes it's harder to see, oh, well, we do this strategic planning process. And when we do that, everything that we're doing in that process goes against the culture we're trying to create,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's the alignment with our systems and practices is really important.
I would add to that, because I'm a proponent of this, is that your decision-making process needs
Yes.
to be part of this.
100%.
Right. So whatever decisions you make as an organization, is it in alignment with the culture and core values of the company? I mean, and I don't care what the decision is.
Right.
From the
Maybe
smallest,
a little.
yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. From the smallest decision to the largest decision, I am a firm believer, and maybe I'm so strong in this because I believe in our core values as people. But that if you have these and you're going to put them out there, then demonstrate them by making sure that your decision making process is part of them.
Yes. Completely. I think it's like a beautiful tool, right? To say
Right.
our values help people make decisions.
Right.
Because people are making decisions all day long. And are they in kind of the direction you want those decisions to go? Well,
Right.
if you're really clear about the culture you're trying to create, they can be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I know this is sad news, but we've done an hour, and well, maybe it's sad for me because I could keep on going with you. I could do this for
I know, me too.
I could do this for another 2 hours, and I feel like
Right.
because we scratched the surface on so much stuff.
It's
But
so interesting, isn't it?
It is, well, it is, and it's,
I think it is.
well, no, and it's fun. I mean, this is fun for me. This is fun to kind of work through this and talk through this. I think if people took their cultures, I got a lot of founders and entrepreneurs and C-suite professionals that listen to this show. So, if it's important, we say it, but when we start digging into it, as you and I did today, because we really did dig, I think what we realize is that we uncover this thing called culture, and we don't recognize how powerful it really is, which is the point of your book. And it's been fun digging with you today. Thank you for letting me dig with you. Tell people how they can get a hold of you, and if they want more information, if they want to hear you speak, if they want to hire you to go in and they want you to, this big giant corporation. I don't know, Amazon could probably use some help right now because they're having a little problem with RTO, and right. So if Jeff Bezos, if you're listening to me right now, you might want to have Laura Hamill come in and handle everything at Amazon. How does Jeff get a hold of you, Laura?
So first, you can link in with me on LinkedIn. I'm just under Laura Hamill, Hamill, and also on my website, ParisPhoenixGroup.com. So Paris, the city, Phoenix, the city group.com. That's my kids' middle names. People always ask, do I have offices in Paris and Phoenix? No, it's just my kids' middle names. So yeah, you can reach me either way, and I would love to connect.
Awesome. Stay with me, will you please? Folks, it's the show. You know what I say to you every week. You got a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you. I appreciate you. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube and wherever you're listening to the show. 5-star reviews are awesome. We appreciate them. And I'm going to say this, and I leave you this every week, right? You're in control of 3 things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. Life does not always give us what we want. In fact, our circumstances can sometimes feel like it works against us. But you know what you do have control over? You have control over your attitude. It's not always easy, but your attitude will change a world of things first. Your effort, which you also have control of, is tied to your excellence. And yeah, we don't always have the same thing every day, but you know what? You can be as excellent as you can be on any given day. And my question to you is, how excellent will you choose to be today in whatever you do? And then finally, resiliency. You know what? We all get punched in the mouth and punched in the gut, and we get knocked down, but it's up to us to get back up. And I'm encouraging you to get back and up. And you know why? Because you're worth it, and we need you on the team. So get back up for us, please. I appreciate you all. You know what? We're going to have another great show. It's going to be another great guest, another great book, which makes it so easy on me because I'm going to have another great show. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.